Earlier this year, I posted a vlog on our channel where I traveled to Nashville searching for the perfect studio speaker, and if you watched that video where I went to Vintage King, you probably saw that I tried out dozens of speakers. I tried out Neumann's, Focals, Genelecs, ATCs, Amphions, literally any speaker that you can think of. Between $2,000 and $15,000, I tried it out there. And at the end of that video, I kind of gave all of my feedback and let you know that I was ending up going with the ATC SCM25 Mark IIs. They're a really nice three-way speaker, $10,000 for the pair, and to be honest, I've been loving them in my studio. They're a perfect studio monitor, but this video is not about those. This is not about any of the other speakers I tried. This is actually about a speaker that I had never heard of until recently called the Fluid Audio Image 2s. So I'm going to tell you in this video all of my thoughts on these speakers. I'm going to give you specs, I'm going to tell you what they actually sound like, and I'm going to tell you if I recommend them and what some other options at this price point might be and how they compete with it. So we're going to look at all of that. There will be timestamps down below if you're interested in just skipping to any specific point. I do just want to say that there is not going to be an audio example because there was no way for me to kind of set it up with microphones in the studio where I felt like it was an accurate representation of these. I just don't have the gear for that. But if you do want to hear these in action, go check out the Produce Like a Pro video that they just did on these. Warren Hewitt did a great job kind of breaking these down and showcasing these. I'll leave a link to that in the description. There are audio examples in his video, so go check that out after mine. But let's jump in and let's actually talk about these speakers and why I'm even making this video and how I even acquired these. Because like I said, I was on the ATCs and loving them, and I still love them. I'm literally looking at them right now, right in front of me. I'm making this specific video because a couple months ago, Fluid Audio actually reached out to me and said, hey, we loved your video where you went to Vintage King and tried out studio monitors. We would love to, kind of send you some of our monitors that we're working on. I think Vintage King actually carries them now, and just get your feedback on them. And I kind of was very honest with them. I told them, I'm not really looking for new monitors. I'm definitely not looking to replace the ATCs. I don't do a lot of gear reviews on the channel. So if you send these, I can't A, promise that I'm gonna like them, B, promise that I'm gonna use them, and C, promise that I'm ever even gonna tell anybody about them. And they were like, that's totally fine. We understand that. We're willing to take the gamble just to kind of get your feedback, get your ears on them, and see if you ever would recommend them and how you feel about them. So I gave them my address. They sent them over to me. And I set them up, and to be honest, I've been using them basically every day for 3 weeks. I haven't even had the ATCs up in almost a month. I am gonna go back to them, which I'll talk about at the end of the video, but these things are fantastic. I haven't really missed the ATCs at all, and out of every monitor that I tried out at Vintage King that day that would have been in that kind of $2,000 to $5,000 range, I think that these are by far the best out of everything I tried in that range. So this is not a sponsored video. I'm not being paid for this. They did send me these monitors, and they did offer for me to keep them if I would use them in the future and if I really like them. So I probably will be keeping them, spoiler alert, but I didn't ask for these. I wasn't in the market for monitors. I'm not being paid. I'm literally just making this video because I don't see enough people talking about these, and I think that they actually could be a really, really good option for most people's studios who are not really looking to get a $10,000 speaker. Let's actually talk about the specs of these. So again, they are called the Fluid Audio Image 2s. They are $1,900 each, which brings them to $3,800, just right below $4,000 for the pair of them, and I actually feel like that's kind of a good value for these. I think that they actually punch above that weight class a little bit. With them being a smaller brand, I know that the branding is not there for you to go pay, $7,000 for Genelecs. But if this exact monitor was done by a different brand, I assume that they would probably be between $1,200 and $1,500 more. So I do think you get a great value for the actual speaker. Okay, really quick interjection. I just finished filming this entire video about 30 minutes ago, and I just got an email from Kenneth from Fluid Audio saying that if you are watching this and you want to actually get a 15% off discount, you can use the code MPM15 at checkout on the Fluid Audio website, and that's going to work on the Image 2, which is the one that we're talking about in this video, or on their budget model, the FX80 or the FX50. So if you want to check out Fluid Audio monitors, definitely use that code. I don't believe at this time I'll be getting any kickback. I think it's more so just to say thank you to all of you guys for checking them out. So if you want to check it out, go save some money, MPM15 at checkout. These are a compact three-way speaker, meaning that you get low-end drivers, mid drivers, and a tweeter. And for the low-end drivers, you actually get two 8-inch drivers that are side firing. This is a closed cabinet, meaning there are no ports. So it's super fast, super punchy. And normally closed cabinets don't have a super extended low end. These sound massive. I'll talk about the sound later, but that is not an issue with these. In terms of the actual mid driver, this is a 5-inch mid cone, which is a great size for a mid driver. We'll talk about some comparisons that are in the same price point and have similar specs. This has the biggest mid driver out of all of those, which means that it can just produce a little bit more. It can have a little bit more depth. It can kind of let the mids breathe a little bit more. And then in terms of the actual tweeters, these have an AMT ribbon style tweeter. Typically, I hate ribbon tweeters. I don't like Atoms. I'm pretty 50-50 on Hedds. And ribbon tweeters to me can kind of get spitty and have this weird like sheen that I don't like. That was not the case with these at all. I went in with reservations about the top end, but to be honest, these are super bright, super accurate, but they're not spitty. They're not super sibilant. They're not super like, they don't have like that weird plasticky sheen on them. They sound great. They're super directional. You can actually have the tweeter on the top or the bottom depending on how you want them and your ear height. So they're great. The construction of them is super, super solid. Materials are nice. And the frequency range that they advertise on these is between 28 Hertz and 20,000 Hertz. You might compare that to something like an Atom where it says it's 40,000 Hertz. But to be honest, these go plenty high for me. They produce top end really, really well. My ATCs only go to 22,000 Hertz. And humans can't really hear past like 18,000 Hertz anyway. So Atom doing that has always kind of seemed like a marketing thing to me. I don't really know if they're really getting extended top end because humans can't hear that. Maybe a dog in the room can, but that's not really something that I would focus on in a monitor. I'm more so focusing on how accurate is the top end, and the Image 2s are great. Let's talk about some other specs that it has, like size and weight and inputs. So I'm gonna pull up some notes right here. In terms of size, we have 9.5 inches by 14.3 inches by 13.8 inches. So again, it is pretty compact. These pack a massive punch. In terms of actual wattage, the two low-end drivers are 225 watts each. The mid-cone driver is 150 watts and the tweeter is 75 watts. So they can get really loud. They don't really distort. They don't start clipping. They don't have that weird breaking apart that a lot of speakers do. They sound fantastic. In terms of weight, these are actually only 27 pounds each. They're pretty lightweight, especially to pack such a punch, and to have so many drivers and amps in them. I was actually a little bit hesitant on the weight because a lot of the time when something is lower weight, people assume that the build qualities are bad. A lot of the time in speakers, there can be cabinet resonance, there can be energy transfer, which means that it's gonna rattle on your speaker stand or on your desk, and that really wasn't the case at all. I was pleasantly surprised by how lightweight these are and how good they are with energy transfer and resonance. I think that they transfer about the same amount of energy through my actual stands as something like my ATCs that are almost 60 pounds, or like a Barefoot Micro Main that are 60 pounds. I am so shocked for how light these are, how little they actually transfer that energy out of the cabinet. In terms of inputs, you have AES inputs and you have XLR inputs for your balanced. You also have 1/4 inch unbalanced inputs, and you have USB connectivity because there is some onboard DSP. So there's actually a mix cube mode on these where you can activate it with a foot switch, or you can activate it via the DSP on the app. And basically what that allows you to do is turn these into something like an Ortone Cube, where it'll basically bypass the tweeter, bypass the low-end drivers, and you can really just produce sound out of the mid-range drivers. And that's gonna give you that kind of speaker box, really, really narrow frequency. If you like referencing like that, that's not something that I do a ton, but I do know a lot of studios will have something like a mix cube up. So if you like that workflow, these can actually do that natively, and it's not really doing that with any weird DSP like filtering. It's literally just bypassing drivers and just giving you a 5-inch mid-cone, which is basically exactly what a mix cube is. The onboard DSP also allows you to upload up to 4 SoundID profiles, so you can do room correction, and the speakers can actually hold those profiles, so you don't have to run it on your computer. It's really nice that it has it on board. This is also something that you see in other speaker brands, but at this price point, I think it's really nice to have the DSP. I don't have any DSP or anything like that on the ATCs. PMCs don't really either. All of those brands are super, super analog, so it was a nice little change of pace having things like DSP and having room correction and having like a mix cube mode. In terms of build quality, like I said before, these were suspiciously lightweight. However, they felt super sturdy. All the knobs feel really, really great. The connectors feel nice and tight. I haven't really had any issues with build quality. I've been blasting these for 3-4 weeks now. Absolutely cranking them, no issues whatsoever. Funny thing, actually, when I bought the ATCs, I did have an issue with build quality. I actually had this mid-range cone that kept kind of distorting and breaking up, and I had to get those replaced, and that ended up being like a month-long process. So build quality from a small brand can either be hit or miss. These have actually been really, really great for me, so I don't really have any negative things to say about build. Let's go ahead and compare these to some direct competitors that are especially in this price range and have similar kind of specs and designs. So the first one would be something like an Atom Audio A8H. Horrible name to try to say. Those are $1,500 per speaker, and those have one 8-inch woofer, a 3.5 inch mid-range driver, and they have the X-ART ribbon tweeter. I actually tried those out. I think they have much less low end. I think the mid-range sounds a lot smaller. It sounds a lot more narrow. The stereo field is kind of terrible on Atoms to me. And then the tweeter has this weird shine and sheen and like spittiness that I really, really don't like. For me personally, I've never enjoyed Atom monitors. That's why I was a little hesitant to even try these, because they kind of have that similar look, kind of have that similar ethos in terms of how they're kind of putting components together, but they sound nothing like an Atom to me. They sound completely different. And in terms of wattage, the Atom A8H is actually 250 watt low end, 70 watt mids, and 20 watt highs, bringing it to a total of 340 watts. Compare that to the Fluid's 675 watt total. You can drive this way harder. I think that you actually get a much more accurate representation at a low volume and a high volume on the Fluids. So again, that's just kind of my feedback. The Atoms do have like room correction software, very similar to the Fluids, but in terms of audio quality, I don't think that they're even comparable, and they're only a couple $100 different. So in my opinion, I would 100% go with the Fluid. I think with the Atoms, you're probably paying a little bit more for the name. I think splurge on the extra little $300 a speaker, go with the Fluids. I don't like the Atoms at all. The other comparison would be something like the Hedd Type 20s. These are also a three-way speaker. These are $2,400 a piece. They have a 7-inch woofer, a 4-inch mid-range driver, and an AMT tweeter. So a very similar tweeter. It only has one woofer. It's a lot smaller. It's 7-inch instead of dual 8-inch. And then the mid-range driver is also an inch smaller, which can kind of mean that it's going to have a little bit more closed up sound. Typically, the bigger a driver, the more it can actually reproduce the sound that it's, you know, designed to do. So having that extra low end driver, having that 5-inch mid-range and something like the Fluids over the Hedds, I think just gives you a little bit more accurate representation. From what I remember of the Hedds, I actually did like them. I think that they were a good style ribbon monitor. I think that these are a great style ribbon monitor. And the Hedds are $2,400 a piece, which means that when you get the package of them, it ends up being about $1,000 cheaper to end up going with something like the Fluid Image 2s, and I think that they actually sound better. There was one cool thing about the Hedds, and that is that they do have a port. You can open or close that port, similar to how you can do with like the ATCs that I have, where you can plug the port if you want to go for a closed cabinet. These are always closed, so if you do like that ported sound or that ported feel in your studio, these are not going to deliver that. These are 100% closed, but I actually prefer a closed cabinet, so I'm not worried about that. Let's actually talk about the sound of these speakers. When I plugged these in, I was not expecting much. I was kind of just coming in with no expectations, just saying like, let's kind of see how it is. I was coming off of really nice speakers that I've really gotten to know over the past 6 months, and literally as soon as I plugged them in, I was shocked. The low end of these, insane. They're super, super extended. I actually find that the low end is much bigger than my ATCs. You definitely do not need a sub with these at all, especially if you're in a small to medium sized room. My room is 13.5 by 13.5. It's fully treated. I don't really use the room correction software. You definitely do not need a sub. I do think that the lows are very controlled. I don't think that you get a lot of that like resonance, especially in like the 100, 200 range. And they're super, super punchy, and they're super, super fast. So typically with speakers, you either get really punchy and fast, or you get really big extended low end. I think that these actually do both very, very well, especially again to be such a small speaker. Let's talk about the mids, because this is really where I get picky with monitors, because I hate the mids of all the focals I tried. I hated the mids of the Barefoots. I hated the mids of the like Amphions. Basically, mids for me are make or break. I actually do like these mids quite a bit. They are a bit more scooped than my ATCs. ATCs are really known for being very, very mid-heavy and very mid-detailed. Like when you listen to something on the ATCs, you can pick out a reverb tail from a mile away. This, you don't get that quite as much, but again, they are 30%, 35% of the price of those. I do think the mid-range of these is super accurate, even though it is a little bit more scooped. I think that the mids are much smoother than the focal shapes that I was coming from, or really any other monitors that I tried. So if you are a mid-range person and you really, really do value that like super crisp detail, you might want to save up and get something like an ATC or like a PMC or like a maybe even like an X Mach and a Pulsar. But again, all of those are $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 a pair. These are $3,800. Let's talk about the high end, because that's what I went in with reservations about. I do think the high end is super nice and extended. I actually think that it's bright, but it's not aggressive. Like there's not really bad sibilance. There's not really bad like high mid grit, especially in that like 2 to 4K range where a vocal can really get like kind of disgusting. It doesn't have that like crunch that you would hear in something like a Barefoot or something like a Focal. And it doesn't really have that like plasticky sheen and something that you would hear in like an Atom. So I actually love the top end in those. I think that for an AMT like ribbon tweeter, it literally couldn't be better. Again, I'm not normally a ribbon guy. Those really, really impressed me. Let's talk about depth. I kind of touched on it with a mid-range, but depth on these is really, really good. I actually do think that they have quite a bit of depth, especially for how small they are and the price point that they're at. They're not the ATCs, right? They're not going to be like a big three-way monitor that's, you know, the size of a small human that is just absolutely detailed where you can go in and you can grab every little transient. They sound amazing. The depth is really, really great. I think it is at the top of their price point, and even competing with one price point higher along that kind of like 5 to 6,500 range. But they're not the ATCs. We kind of all knew that going in. They're still fantastic. In terms of loudness, they're loud as shit, honestly. Like, that's all I'll say is you can crank these up. They stay super accurate. They don't start breaking up. They don't get really weird and sharp and tinny. They're super fun to listen to. I actually will probably try to keep these as a B set in my studio so I can produce on them and kind of bump music when I have a client in the room and then swap to the ATCs for really detailed work, because ATCs can be a bit boring to produce on. These are a blast to produce on, but they're still accurate. In terms of stereo field, I think the stereo field is pretty good. You can definitely get that full spread of range. I definitely think that kind of like phantom center that you get in something like an ATC or a Genelec that are really known for how they do their stereo spread is not as apparent in these, but I think that the stereo field is much better than like a Focal or a Barefoot, because I find that those kind of smear. They have weird kind of like time domain phasey issues unless they're absolutely perfect. I don't think that these have any of that issue. I think that stereo field is really nice. It's wide. That phantom center is not like the most apparent thing, but I haven't really heard that in any speakers that are basically under $8,000 a pair. And then the last thing is, let's talk about the sweet spot. This is the only area where I had a little bit of an issue. I actually think the sweet spot at ear level is great. Like, you can move around. They sound great at the back of the room, great at the front of the room. The one issue that I have is, since those kind of ribbon tweeters are so directional, if your ear starts to get like decently above ear level, like let's say ear level's here and my head goes to about here, there's a very, very, very steep drop off in the top end. I think directional tweeters are great for kind of giving you that nice stereo spread. However, if your ears go above that or below that drastically, it does really start to have a detriment on the sound. So just be very, very apparent when you're kind of setting them up and balancing them with ear level, because if you can get your ear level with that tweeter, they sound amazing. If your ear level is not right in with those, they're not my favorite. Now let's go ahead and go over my pros and cons and my final thoughts so we can kind of wrap this video up. Overall, would I recommend them? Yes, absolutely. I was so impressed that I decided to make this video, not sponsored or anything like that. I do think that they are a monitor that more people should be trying out. I am surprised I'm not seeing them in basically every other room in Nashville. And I think at the price range, they are out competing almost all of their competitors. Are these going to replace my ATCs? No, I will probably end up swapping back to the ATCs and, like I said earlier, leaving these as a B pair. I've just gotten really spoiled with that depth that you get in something like an ATC, but again, those are $10,000 a pair. These are $3,800 a pair. These are much more fun to produce on. Those are much more detailed for like nitty-gritty mixing and sound design work. It's just two different beasts. They're not replacing them, but I will be adding them to my kind of rotation. Overall, I think that these are great. I think that there are a couple small areas of improvement, just like that directionality with the tweeter. I did have like a weird issue where my foot pedal wasn't completely closing, but I don't use it that much anyway, so I wasn't worried about that. And then just in terms of like actual branding, that's my only con, is that I don't really love the look of these, but I don't love the look of really any ribbon style monitor. I don't like Atoms, I don't like Hedds. So that's just kind of a personal thing. I know a lot of people saw these and talked about how amazing they looked. Not my favorite aesthetically. That's neither here nor there. They still sound great. I do think that like the fluid branding and like the packaging and stuff feels a little bit budget compared to something like when you unbox, like we've talked about Atom a bunch. Their branding and their packaging is great, right? You're paying for that. They're known for that. I do think that if Fluid were to just kind of update their logo and their badging and some of their packaging, I think that it could kind of push them into that $4,500 to $5,000 range for their monitors. But if you're okay with packaging that you're going to throw away anyway, and with a little logo that just sits on the front of the speaker that nobody cares about, and that means that you can save a lot of money and still have the speaker, that might be a pro to you. It's just one of those things that aesthetically, when I'm putting together a studio, little things like that kind of stand out to me. But again, it's really nothing to do with sound. It's kind of just personal aesthetic taste. Another little con that I have, and this is not actually with the speakers, it's more so with SoundID, is that when you do SoundID or SonarWorks, it can be really aggressive. So I find that a lot of the time what I recommend people do is measure your space, kind of get the SoundID profile, and then really just try it at like 30%, 50% correction, because driving these up to 100% correction, I think it gets a bit weird. It gets a bit wonky. The measurement microphones that they give you sometimes have issues, even though they say that they're flat and they have their own profiles. I think that I'm not really that interested in using the room correction software, and if I ever do use it, I use it at like 30%. So if you like that, go ahead and use it. I'm not a big fan of that. Like I said, it is a pro that you can kind of have it on the DSP and just upload it. However, beware, because it can get really intense very fast. And to close it out, just to kind of recap my pros, super amazing frequency response. These things sound incredible. They're enjoyable to produce on, but still accurate enough to mix on. They are compact and lightweight, so if you're in a small footprint, they fit really great in a studio, but they still sound absolutely massive. And they're super fast to work on. Like on the ATCs, they're so detailed that you can find yourself like overly critical and kind of fixing things that are really like negligible returns. On these, I was cranking out mixes and productions just like immediately, and they were translating really well. On the ATCs, I can get that last little like 2% difference that, in my opinion, makes those worth the money and worth staying up. But on these, to 99.9% of people, the things that I was pumping out in about half the time sounded incredible. So that's all of my thoughts on these speakers. Again, if you want to check them out, go check out Fluid Audio. I do appreciate them sending me these monitors. I do plan on keeping these. They did also send me a pair of their budget monitors, the kind of 8-inch coaxial monitors. So I do plan on actually setting those up and trying those out. I'll probably post a review of that one on Instagram just because they're a little bit smaller. I don't think that they're going to warrant a whole video. And then after I test those out, I'll probably be giving those away. So if you're kind of interested in hearing my thoughts on the Fluid Audio budget line and possibly winning a free pair in the future, go follow us on Instagram at Make Pop Music. Other than that, if you want to support us, head over to our website, makepopmusic.com. We have sample packs, preset packs, MIDI packs, courses. I know that sometimes people love the gear videos, people hate the gear videos. I just thought studio monitors are such an important thing for a studio. Nobody's talking about these. This could kind of bring a lot of value to people who might be looking for a monitor. So hopefully you enjoyed these. If you have any questions about these speakers, let me know down in the comments below and I'll answer as much as I can. But that's going to do it for this video, and I will see you guys soon. Much love. Peace.